The woods have always called to me, not with a whisper, but with a hum that vibrates beneath the skin. You don't just go hiking out here to escape the noise of the world. You go because something inside you believes that solitude is the cure, that silence is sacred, that wildness will somehow tame you. But no one tells you what happens when the woods decide they don't want to let you go. When your love for the trail turns into a slow, grinding descent into fear. My name is Caleb. I was 29 years old when I set out alone for a 3-day hike through the ravine trail of the Cascade Foothills. I came back changed, dragged out by rescue teams after spending 3 nights at the bottom of a ravine, without food, without water, with nothing but the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, and the realization that the wild does not care if you live or die. The first mistake I made was in the confidence I wore like armor. I'd done hikes longer than this, higher elevations, rougher terrain, but confidence is not preparation. I packed light, too light. I told only one person where I was going, and even then, not the full route. No GPS beacon, no flare, just a compass, a trail map printed 2 years ago, and my gut. The Cascade Ravine is not the kind of place that forgives a wrong step. It's beautiful in a way that tricks the mind into reverence. Old-growth trees stretching so high they swallow the light, moss-draped rocks that feel like sacred altars, streams that whisper lullabies as they cut through the stone. But it's also unpredictable. Shifting trails, sudden weather, and drop-offs hidden behind ferns so thick they look like walls. It was late afternoon on my second day when I veered off trail. I wasn't lost. Not yet. I saw what looked like a shortcut, a slope that curved steeply downward, maybe half a mile through the trees, and I told myself it saved me 2 hours of looping around switchbacks. I took that step. One step. My foot hit loose shale. The ground gave. And in less than 2 seconds, I was tumbling. Branches slashed my face. Rocks punched into my back. My own pack twisted over my shoulder like a noose. I don't remember the impact. I just remember the silence after. The sick, absolute silence of a place untouched. I opened my eyes and saw nothing but sky and green canopy, broken only by the taste of blood and the pressure in my ankle that told me something was wrong. When I tried to stand, I felt the searing heat shoot up my leg. My ankle wasn't just sprained, it was shattered. I couldn't walk. My phone had flown somewhere into the undergrowth and wouldn't have worked even if I had found it. No signal, no reception for miles. And worst of all, I didn't know exactly where I'd fallen. Panic doesn't come in one big wave. It trickles in. At first, I thought I'd crawl my way back, make a splint, climb the ridge. But the moment I tried to pull myself up the ravine, the slope kicked loose under me again, and I slid further down, deeper into the hollow. That was when it hit me. I wasn't just injured. I was trapped. Night in the forest is a living thing. It moves, it breathes, it tightens around you like a slow, steady grip. The temperature dropped fast. I had no fire, just a rain shell and what was left in my day pack, half a protein bar, a crushed water bottle with a few sips left, and a tiny flashlight that flickered like it was dying along with my hope. I wedged myself against the base of a fallen tree, trying to keep my injured foot elevated and wrapped in torn shirt fabric. Every sound became a threat. Rustling leaves, snapping branches, a low groan in the distance that could have been wind or something much worse. Out there, your brain turns on itself. You remember stories, tales of cougars tracking the weak, of bears drawn to blood. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I just stared into the dark, counting every breath and waiting for morning. On the second day, the thirst became unbearable. My mouth dried out so badly my tongue stuck to my teeth. My muscles ached from the cold and the tension of bracing against pain. I screamed for help until my voice cracked and my throat bled. No answer, just the echo of my own desperation. I tried to crawl, not upward this time, but sideways, hoping I'd find a stream or a flat patch where I could signal for help. I made it maybe 20 feet before collapsing from the nausea and the pain in my leg, now so swollen I couldn't bear to look at it. That's when the hallucinations began. little things at first, thinking I heard footsteps above me, voices calling my name, then faces in the leaves, shapes in the canopy, flashes of movement in my periphery that vanished the moment I turned. My brain was trying to protect me by breaking. I'll tell you something I never said out loud before. That second night, I was ready to die. I don't mean that as drama. I mean, I was laying there, curled in mud, my whole body trembling from cold and dehydration, and I made peace with it. I remember looking up at the stars through a break in the trees and thinking, so this is how it ends. Quiet, alone, swallowed by the earth I thought I could conquer. And strangely, there was peace in it. Not fear, just release. I thought of my sister's laugh. My father's old hiking boots I wore that day. A woman I hadn't spoken to in years, but suddenly missed so much it hurt more than the broken bone. You don't expect your life to flash before your eyes like a movie. It doesn't. It comes in fragments, moments that mattered and others you forgot until they show up like ghosts. And then, on the third day just after dawn, I heard it, a sound I hadn't imagined. Real, measured, deliberate, footsteps, not animal, human, a voice shouting. Then another. I don't remember what I screamed back. I just remember the pain of forcing myself upright and waving my arm with the last of my strength, banging my flashlight against a tree trunk so it would flash. It took them 20 minutes to reach me. I'd fallen over 120 feet. A volunteer SAR team had been combing the ridge above after someone from a nearby ranger station mentioned hearing faint calls echoing through the valley. They said if they'd waited another 6 hours, I might not have made it. They carried me out on a stretcher, but part of me never left that ravine. I was in the hospital for a week. IVs, surgery, physical therapy. But the biggest healing didn't come from medicine. It came from understanding. From knowing that the wilderness doesn't owe us anything. It gives, and it takes, and it tests us not to punish, but to remind us we're not in control. That even with our maps and tech and gear, we're just guests out there, and we better act like it. There's a silence that lives inside you after something like that, different from the quiet you seek when you head into the woods. It's heavier, like it's waiting for something. When I lay in bed those first few nights after getting back, I couldn't close my eyes without seeing that ravine, without feeling the damp cold settle into my chest again. People asked if I was scared. Of course I was. But what they didn't understand is that fear wasn't the worst part. It was the helplessness, that bone-deep realization that no matter how strong you think you are, the wilderness doesn't care. Nature isn't cruel, but it is completely unapologetically indifferent. That changes a person. I used to think of hiking as something I could conquer, like a summit was a trophy and a trail was a challenge to beat. But now, when I step out onto a path, it's with reverence. I walk softer, I listen more, I bring more than I need. And I make damn sure someone knows exactly where I'm going. Not because I'm afraid, but because I finally understand the weight of risk. Because I've seen what happens when you get too comfortable, too casual, when you forget how quickly everything can fall apart. And yet I still hike. I still return to the trees, the streams, the quiet. Not because I'm reckless, but because something in me needs that space, needs the reminder of how small I am and how beautiful that smallness can be. There's something sacred in being reminded you're not the center of anything, that the world keeps turning with or without you, that the stars still rise and fall, whether you're watching them from the warmth of a cabin or the floor of a ravine. I went back there once, about 6 months later, the same trail, the same ridge, this time with a friend. We stood above the slope where I fell, and I felt it all again, the panic, the pain, the breathlessness of not knowing if help would ever come. But I didn't feel weak. I felt strong, because I'd made it, because I'd learned, because even in the darkest hours, something inside me kept fighting. Even when my body was ready to quit, something in my soul held on. That's what survival is. Not just about crawling your way out. It's about never letting go of the part of you that still believes there's something worth crawling for. I think about that often now. how close I came, how fragile it all is. A twist of the foot, a slip of the rock, and suddenly everything changes. Your whole life hangs on a branch, a breath, a decision made too quickly. We all live on the edge of something. Some of us just get closer than others. And if you're hearing this, if you're someone who loves the wild, the quiet, the deep woods like I do, then hear this too. Respect it. Not in words, but in action. Check your gear, over-prepare, leave the ego at the trailhead. Because out there, the rules are different. Out there, it's not about proving anything. It's about understanding that you're a guest and the forest has no obligation to show you mercy. But also know this, there's a power in that surrender. There's freedom in knowing you don't control everything. The wild will humble you, yes. But it will also show you something most people spend their lives avoiding. The truth. About who you are when no one is watching. About how deep your will runs. About what you're really made of when there's nothing left to lean on but yourself. The ravine didn't just break my ankle, it shattered something deeper, that illusion of control. And in its place, it left something stronger. A quiet resilience, a fierce gratitude, a new way of seeing the world and my place in it. So when I hike now, I carry more than a pack. I carry those 3 days with me. That darkness, that silence, that cold, but also that fire. That moment I heard voices above me and I knew I'd been seen, I'd been found, and I would live. And that's why I still go back. Because the trail didn't just almost kill me. It saved me. It stripped away everything that didn't matter and showed me exactly what does. The wild gives you nothing, but in that nothing, you can find everything. Most people think survival is about strength, muscles, endurance, the ability to fight your way through whatever nature throws at you. But they're wrong. Out there, it's not about how strong you are. It's about how still you can be, how present, how much you're willing to feel every inch of your fear and still move anyway. Survival isn't the roar of a lion. It's the whisper of a breath that says, 1 more hour, and then another after that, until the sun rises, until help comes, until your feet hit ground again. I wish I could say I came out of that ravine a hero, that I did something incredible to survive. But the truth is I didn't give up. That's it. That's the whole story in its rawest form. I didn't give up when the pain came. I didn't give up when my own mind turned against me. I didn't give up when it would have been easier to just close my eyes and let go. And in that decision, not a grand one, but a quiet, stubborn, painful one, I found who I really am. You don't need to fall down a ravine to learn this, but you do need to go somewhere that humbles you. Go somewhere that strips away the noise, the comfort, the excuses. Let the wind tear through your jacket. Let the cold sit with you. Let the trees remind you that you are not the center of anything. Because out there, away from the glow of screens and the buzz of cities, you meet the part of yourself that doesn't lie. It's not about fear. It's about respect. It's about stepping into the wild, not to take, but to listen. And if the forest speaks, you better be damn sure you're listening with more than your ears. You listen with your gut, your bones, your instincts. Because sometimes that feeling in your chest that says, turn back, isn't anxiety. It's wisdom. It's every ancestor who came before you, whispering through the trees, trying to keep you alive. There are moments I still wake up to the memory of lying in that ravine. The sound of leaves above me, the ache in my throat, the weight of silence pressing on my chest like a second gravity. But I don't run from that memory anymore. I honor it. I carry it like a scar you don't hide, because it taught you something no one else could. It taught me that survival isn't a single act. It's thousands of tiny ones. It's rationing half a bottle cap of water. It's whispering your name into the dark so you don't forget who you are. It's holding on to the image of someone you love so tightly that it lights a fire in your chest and keeps you breathing, even when you want to quit. It's watching ants crawl by and realizing you envy their purpose, their direction, their knowing. And when they pulled me out, When that first beam of sunlight hit my face after they cleared the canopy and I heard the voices saying, "We've got him," I wept, not from relief, not even from pain. I wept because I had made it through the kind of quiet that changes you forever. To anyone listening who's planning a trip, a hike, a solo expedition into the woods, plan for the joy, yes, but prepare for the silence, because it's in that silence where you'll either break or become something new. Bring more than you think you'll need. Tell more people than you think necessary. Leave a note. Bring a beacon. Practice the kind of caution that doesn't come from fear, but from deep love for your own life, for the people waiting for you to come back. And if you do ever find yourself trapped, whether by rock or rain or your own choices, don't waste your energy hating it. Learn from it. Feel it. Use it. Because that pain, that fear, that raw wilderness pressing in from all sides, it's not there to destroy you. It's there to refine you, to scrape away everything that's not real and leave you with nothing but truth. You won't like all of what you see, but you will come out knowing who you are. I don't hike to escape anymore. I hike to remember, to reconnect with that broken, bruised version of myself who refused to die. I go back to say, you mattered. You were worth saving. You are still here. So when the wind cuts through the pines, when the sun sinks below the ridge and the darkness comes crawling back, I no longer fear it. I greet it because I know now it saw me once and it let me live. And for the rest of my days, I will live like I earned it. It began the way most tragedies do, not with a scream, but with silence. That strange, heavy quiet that descends just before everything unravels. You never think it'll be you. You read the stories, you watch the documentaries, you nod your head and say, they should have been more careful. But when you're standing at the edge of the trail with the sun warming your skin and the forest breathing steady around you, it doesn't feel like danger. It feels like freedom. Until it doesn't. My name is Eli Mercer. I was 28 years old when I hiked into the wilds of Olympic National Park with nothing but a day pack, a Garmin GPS, and a heart full of overconfidence. I'd grown up in Oregon, spent half my life in the woods, backpacking, fishing, climbing. I wasn't naive. I wasn't unprepared. At least I didn't think I was. That's what makes this story hard to tell. Because I didn't just make one mistake. I made 100 tiny ones that led to 7 nights of cold terror, hallucinations, hunger, and the brutal realization that nature doesn't care who you are or what you think you know. It only cares if you survive. The morning I left was perfect, late September, the kind of chill in the air that whispers of the coming winter, but still lets you hike in a t-shirt by midday. I parked at the Storm King trailhead just before dawn, planning to complete a 12-mile loop that would bring me back to the car by sunset. I'd done parts of the trail before. I knew the landmarks. I trusted my gear. I let confidence override caution, and I didn't tell anyone exactly where I'd be. A vague text to a buddy, Storm King today, back by dark, was the extent of my safety net. No planned check-in, no detailed route. Just me, the mountain, and that little GPS clipped to my chest strap like a badge of invincibility. The first few hours were smooth. The trail curled up through dense evergreens, past ridges that opened into knife-edge views of Lake Crescent, glittering like a broken mirror below. I took my time, ate a protein bar by a waterfall, laughed when I scared up a black-tailed deer. I wasn't thinking about getting lost. I was thinking about how alive I felt out there, how small and infinite all at once. It started going wrong sometime around noon. I'd taken what I thought was a shortcut, a side trail, lightly trodden, but clearly there. My GPS didn't argue. It blinked its little digital confidence, charting my progress, guiding me deeper into the trees. I trusted it, never questioned the silence, never checked for markers or paper maps. The woods got denser, shadows lengthened, a fog rolled in, not thick, but enough to steal the edges of things. I told myself it was fine, that the GPS had me, that it always had me. But about 2 hours later, the screen froze, just like that. No error message, no warning. One second I was following the arrow, the next I was staring at a map that wouldn't move. I tapped it, held the button, rebooted, nothing. The satellite signal had died, or the unit had glitched. Either way, I was in a forest that had stopped looking familiar a while back, surrounded by trees that all looked the same, with no trail beneath my feet, just moss and silence. I didn't panic, not at first. I turned around, tried retracing my steps, but every tree looked like the last. Every rock and slope mirrored the one before. You think you'll be able to tell, that you'll remember the angle of the hill, the way the roots curve like fingers across the path. But the truth is, once you're off trail, the forest becomes something else. It stops being a place. It becomes a maze, an echo chamber, a trap with no walls, just time slipping through your fingers. By the time I admitted I was lost, the sun had started to drop behind the ridgeline. The temperature followed it. I had no tent, no sleeping bag, no fire starter, just a windbreaker, some snacks, a water filter, and a knife. That first night, I curled up under a half-fallen log and tried to convince myself this would be over tomorrow, that I'd find the trail, that someone would come looking. But morning brought no rescue, just aching limbs, a hunger that curled in my belly, and a growing sense of dread. Days passed. I moved by instinct, by hope, by sheer stubbornness. I found a stream and followed it, thinking it might lead to a road or ranger cabin. It didn't. It twisted endlessly, dipping into ravines and through deadfalls so thick I had to crawl. I slipped once and cut my leg on a jagged root. The bleeding stopped, but the pain didn't. My pace slowed. I rationed my food, 3 protein bars over 7 days. I foraged for huckleberries, ate tree bark once just to chew on something. It made me sick, but the distraction was worth it. Nights were the worst. The cold sank deep and the forest came alive with things I couldn't see. Owls, coyotes, something heavier that cracked branches in the dark. I started to hear things, voices. My own name whispered from the trees. Once, I was sure I saw my father's face in the shadows. He's been dead 5 years. The mind breaks slowly, but it does break. You just don't notice until you're laughing at nothing or crying because a squirrel ran too close. On the 5th day, I found a boot print in the mud. It wasn't mine. It was old, but it was human. A sign I wasn't alone. It gave me just enough hope to keep walking. I stopped checking the GPS. It was a dead weight now, a reminder of the lie I trusted. I started marking trees with scratches, building small cairns to track my movement. Primitive, but comforting, like I was speaking a language older than maps. One night, I carved a message into a flat rock. If you find this, tell my mom I didn't give up. That's what it came down to. Not surviving, not escaping, just not giving up. Each step wasn't about getting out. It was about not stopping. Because once you stop, once you sit down and let the quiet take over, that's when the woods win. And I wasn't ready to lose. On the 7th morning, I smelled smoke. That's what saved me. Not a helicopter, not a search party. A thin ribbon of wood smoke curling through the trees like a thread of hope. I followed it uphill, legs shaking, hands blistered, until I stumbled into a group of backcountry campers who looked at me like they were seeing a ghost. I probably looked like one, mud-caked, bleeding, eyes sunken deep into my skull. I collapsed before I could speak. Woke up in a ranger station wrapped in a thermal blanket, sipping hot broth while someone radioed in my name. I had lost 17 pounds. My leg was infected, but I was alive. I was alive. There's a moment after you've survived something like that where the world feels unreal. Like you're walking through a copy of your old life, but everything's just a little off. The light feels too sharp. The colors too loud. People talk to you like you've been on vacation. So glad you're back. But you're not really back. Not yet. Your body may have left the woods, but some part of you stays there. A part that doesn't sleep right anymore. A part that flinches when the wind rustles through pine trees. A part that remembers, and it remembers everything. The ache in my bones, the way time stopped meaning anything after the 3rd day. How I could feel myself shrinking, No longer a man with a job and a phone and weekend plans, but just a body trying to keep breathing. You start to lose pieces of yourself out there. You shed them like old skin, ego, pride. Even your name starts to sound strange after a while. In the woods, there's no identity, no past, no future, just now. And sometimes now is teeth chattering cold and the gnaw of hunger and the sound of something watching you from the trees. The rangers told me I was lucky, that if I'd gone another day without finding those campers, hypothermia or infection might have finished what the wilderness started. They said there hadn't been an active search because no one knew I was missing. No one had called in. That vague text I sent, it was just that, vague. A pin dropped into silence, a warning no one heard. That hit me harder than anything else. Not just the physical toll, but the realization that I'd made it so easy to disappear. One misstep, one dead battery, and I had simply vanished. You don't forget that. You don't walk away from that. You carry it. People ask me now what I learned out there, like there's a moral tucked into the story somewhere, an easy lesson they can write down and use to avoid their own disaster. But there's nothing easy about it. The lesson, if there is one, is this. The forest doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care if you're smart, strong, skilled, or spiritual. It doesn't care if you have a GPS or God on your side. If you walk into it unprepared, it will take you. And sometimes if it's feeling merciful, it'll let you crawl back out again. I learned to respect that silence, to fear it, but also in some strange way to love it. Because inside that silence, I met a version of myself I didn't know existed, a stripped-down, desperate, wild-eyed version who refused to die, who sang to the trees when the fear got too big, who talked to the birds, prayed to the wind, and carved tally marks into a branch just to remember that time was still moving. I didn't survive because I'm brave. I survived because I didn't stop, because something ancient inside me remembered how to live without certainty, without direction, without comfort. I tapped into instincts I didn't know I had, like how to keep my core warm with pine needles, how to let my ears guide me when my eyes lied, how to listen for water, how to sleep with one ear open. I became an animal, and when you become an animal, you stop waiting for rescue. You become the rescue. And when I finally got home, when I sat in my apartment for the first time in a week and stared at the light switch like it was magic, I broke, not with fear or trauma or even sadness. I broke with gratitude for the floor under my feet, for the food in my fridge, for the sound of my own name spoken by someone who knew I was gone. It's easy to forget how thin the line is between comfort and chaos, between the world you live in and the one that waits just beyond the tree line. But I don't forget anymore. Every time I hear a branch snap in the woods, every time my boots hit the dirt, I remember. And I plan. I over-prepare. I leave a route. I carry backups for my backups. And not because I'm scared, but because I know better now. Because once you've been lost in the wild, once you've looked into the eyes of your own undoing, you don't walk away with bravado. You walk away humbled. Humbled by how fast it all can change. Humbled by how thin that thread of survival really is. And how strong it can become when you refuse to let go. The people who survive aren't always the strongest. They're the ones who adapt, who endure, who learn. I learned that my life is worth more than my pride. I learned that maps matter more than memories. I learned that when the batteries die, your mind is the last tool you have. And if it breaks, everything else goes with it. And I learned, above all, that survival is not an act of heroism. It is a series of small decisions, each one made in the dark, each one carrying you 1 inch closer to home. So if you ever find yourself standing where I stood, with no trail, no signal, and no clear way out, don't wait for the rescue. Be the one who crawls forward anyway. Make the fire from damp twigs, drink from the stream, cut your name into stone. And when the forest whispers to give up, scream back that you're still here. Because sometimes survival isn't about beating the wild. Sometimes it's just about whispering not today and taking the next step anyway. I didn't tell anyone the full story for a long time, not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't have the words. How do you explain the feeling of watching the sun set through trees you don't recognize, knowing you'll be sleeping under them again, and not by choice? How do you describe the exact pitch of your own fear when you realize that no one is coming? That this broken wilderness, this endless green, is now your entire world? People want a neat conclusion. They want to hear that I found clarity in the woods, that I came back a better man, more in tune with the universe, more grounded. But the truth is messier. I came back with scars, both visible and invisible. I came back with a limp that lasted 6 weeks and a dread that still tightens my throat when I hear a GPS beep. I came back changed, but not in a way that makes for a tidy story. Still, there were moments in those 7 days, moments I almost hate to admit, where something inside me awakened. In between the hunger and the aching and the cold, there was a quiet, and it wasn't empty. It was alive. The silence of the woods, once terrifying, started to feel like a presence, a kind of vast awareness, not watching me exactly, but indifferent to me in a way that forced humility. Out there, you're not the center of anything. You're just another creature trying not to die. And weirdly, there's peace in that. It strips away all the noise of the world, your deadlines, your social media, your bank account. None of that matters when you're searching for dry wood with trembling hands. What matters is warmth, water, rest, the next step. And yet, that simplicity didn't bring ease. It brought confrontation. I had to look myself in the eye and ask questions I wasn't prepared for. Would I be remembered? Had I lived in a way that mattered? Who would mourn me? Who would blame themselves? You have those thoughts when you're deep in it, not just about survival, but about legacy. And the terrifying realization that you might die invisible, just another guy swallowed by the trees. That thought alone is enough to make you move, even when your legs shake, even when you haven't eaten in days, even when your brain starts offering you easier ways out. Because something primal kicks in, the stubborn, defiant spark that refuses to let you vanish. It's not courage, not really. It's instinct. And when you feel it, truly feel it, you begin to understand the ancient power of those who came before us, the explorers, the wanderers, the tribes who learned to live in harmony with the land instead of conquering it. I saw shadows of them in my dreams during those nights, ghosts in my periphery. And I swear, I could feel them at times, urging me forward, reminding me I wasn't the first to get lost, and I wouldn't be the last. When the Rangers finally debriefed me, they asked if I wanted counseling. I said no at first. I was too proud, too wrapped up in the thrill of simply being alive. But weeks later, when I couldn't stop waking up drenched in sweat, heart pounding from dreams of moss-covered ravines and broken bones, I made the call, and I'm glad I did. Because surviving is only part of the journey. Coming home is another. And here's something they don't tell you. When you come back from the brink, people don't know what to do with you. Some treat you like a hero, others like a cautionary tale. But almost no one truly gets it. Because unless you've slept with your back to a tree trunk, listening for predators, feeling the raw earth pull heat from your body while you calculate whether to keep walking or rest and risk not waking up, you can't really understand. But maybe that's why I'm telling you this now. Not to scare you away from the wilderness. I'd never do that. But to warn you and to prepare you. Because the forest is beautiful, it's sacred, but it's not forgiving. It doesn't owe you safety. It doesn't negotiate. And if you walk into it thinking you're in control, it will teach you otherwise, with roots that trip, rivers that mislead, weather that shifts like a trickster god. And sometimes it teaches through absence, by letting you vanish. So when you pack your bag, do it like your life depends on it, because it might. Tell people where you're going. Write it down. Share your route. Carry a map that folds, not one that glows. Double your food, triple your fire starter. And most of all, don't rely on a single point of failure. Electronics are gods until the batteries die. The wild doesn't punish, it reveals. It revealed me. It peeled away the stories I told myself. It showed me the frailty of my assumptions. And in doing so, it gave me a strange kind of gift. Clarity, the kind you only get when everything else is stripped away. Now, when I go back into the woods, and I do because I can't stay away, I do it differently. My respect is no longer romantic. It's earned. I don't just walk into the trees. I ask, I listen, I observe, I trace the wind, I take fewer risks, but I see more. And in every rustle of the canopy, in every stone I step over, I feel the pulse of something ancient and unforgiving, and yet breathtakingly beautiful. Because that's what the wild is. It's everything at once. Life, death, silence, song, darkness, light. It's where you meet the version of yourself you've been avoiding. The one that doesn't care about your job title, your follower count, your bank account. The one that only asks, can you keep going? And that question, simple, brutal, true, is one I now live by. Not just in the woods, but every day, in traffic, in grief, in uncertainty, in heartbreak. When things fall apart, I hear the forest ask again, can you keep going? And I answer with every fiber of my being, yes, because I have before, and I will again. I still hear the river before I see it, a relentless murmur sliding through cedar-clad ravines, and every time my pulse obeys its rhythm. That sound dragged me forward on the fourth night when moonlight burned white on the stones and my body felt like a guttered candle. I'd followed the slope by feeling with my hands because my headlamp was dead, thorns tearing lines into my forearms, the cold air slitting each breath into glass. When water finally broke from the dark like a ribbon of starlight, I knelt on the bank and laughed, half delirious at the taste. Metallic, wild, alive. Now, whenever I fill a bottle on a civilized trail, that memory flares, the weight of the bottle suddenly sacred, the ordinary miracle of being able to drink without wondering if this swallow will poison or save me. The river taught me motion. Long after rescue, I found myself studying its braids on satellite maps, tracing where I must have crawled, where I rested beneath that slanted hemlock trunk, where I left a strip of nylon from my pack as a marker no one would ever notice. In therapy, they call this integration, turning scattered flashes into a coherent timeline. But it felt more like resewing a torn sail with threads of terror and wonder. Each detail mattered. The greasy taste of spruce tips when the berries were gone, the way distant thunder rolled through the valley like a giant dragging chains. The moment I realized that the shaggy silhouette staring through the brush was only a stump wearing moss. Remembering hurt, but forgetting felt like betrayal, a dismissal of the price that week demanded. To honor that price, I began to teach, not from a podium, but on trailheads at dawn, at community centers on rainy Tuesdays, anywhere a handful of weekend hikers would listen. I'd spread a map on a scarred folding table, set a compass beside it like an offering, and speak the unpolished truth. Technology is a tool, not a promise. The woods are older than your gadgets, and they outlive your batteries. I told them about layering clothes not for Instagram aesthetics, but to keep skin from stiffening into marble when the temperature nosedives 10 degrees in an hour. I demonstrated how to build a Tinder bundle even with fingers that refused to unclench. Some sessions ended with quiet applause, others with silence so thick I could hear fear settling into hearts the way cold settles into lungs on a windless night. Either reaction meant success. Fear, properly harnessed, is a compass that never lies. Yet lectures alone couldn't satisfy the restlessness the ordeal ignited. I needed action, something that blurred the line between penance and purpose. So I trained as a volunteer search and rescue tracker. The first call-out came 6 months after my own recovery. A teenage boy had wandered off a poorly marked ridge while geocaching. The irony tasted sharp, missing because of a device meant to pinpoint certainty. We combed the drainage at midnight, headlamps slicing webs of breath and drizzle. When we found him, hypothermic, sheet pale, mumbling about his phone, I wrapped my spare blanket around his shoulders and whispered the only truth worth sharing out there. You're not weaker because you're scared. You're alive because you are. He nodded through chattering teeth, and in that nod I saw my own reflection, a mirror forged in shadow and relief. Survival, I've learned, is less a single triumph than a lifelong dialogue. On certain mornings, the conversation is gentle. I step onto a well-marked path, sunlight filtering soft through maples, and gratitude speaks louder than old dread. Other days, the dialogue is a storm. Crowds press too close, alarms beep, and suddenly the forest hush roars inside my skull. I flinch, heart sprinting, as if the beeps are my GPS dying all over again. When that happens, I ground myself with small rituals. Press thumb to compass glass, feel its cool certainty. Inhale through the nose for 4 counts like I'm drawing sweet spruce air. Exhale slow, remembering the chill that once cut deeper than any memory. The panic recedes, but not out of existence. It lingers, a scar under the skin of routine, visible only when the light slants just so. If this story has an ember of hope, it burns here. Pain can be repurposed. The scramble of those 7 nights, the hallucinated voices, the raw certainty of impending erasure, all of it became flint I strike whenever complacency threatens the people I guide. During workshops, I simulate gear failure. I confiscate phones, dim the lights, hide trail markers, and watch participants stumble into disorientation that lasts mere minutes, yet feels endless. When they emerge, faces drawn, hearts thudding, we debrief not just on navigation skills, but on the whispers that rose inside their skulls. That's the curriculum the wilderness forced upon me. The cartography of fear, the syntax of perseverance, the truth that rescue begins not with a flare or a whistle, but with the refusal to surrender to the story your panic is trying to write. I'm often asked whether I'd erase those 7 days if I could. My mouth answers before my mind, no. Then comes the uncomfortable pause while listeners recalibrate their expectations of tragedy. The ordeal ravaged my body, yes, but it excavated a deeper canyon in me, one wide enough to hold gratitude I never imagined possible. Every mundane blessing, hot coffee, dry socks, a room that stays warm without tending a fire, shines against the backdrop of that canyon. It's a strange bargain, but authentic. The wilderness took a piece of me and filled the vacancy with unflinching reverence. Reverence, though, is not the same as romance. I refuse to varnish the wild with sentimental gloss. I remember the smell of my own fear, acrid like battery acid, coating my tongue. I recall calculating whether a sacrifice, a smashed finger for a spark, a slice of skin for traction would be worth the incremental gain in survival odds. I remember rationing words to conserve throat moisture, humming instead of speaking, because even breath felt like currency. These memories are anchors. They keep my awe honest. They remind me to scrutinize every knot, every weather report, every assumption before I shoulder a pack. And here's the marrow of what I've learned. The line between adventure and ordeal is not luck. It is preparation layered with humility. Humility is what compels you to turn back when the storm front creeps faster than forecast. Humility is what coaxes you to rest before exhaustion chips motor skills into dust. Humility is what persuades you to admit, out loud, to another breathing human, exactly where you plan to tread and when you plan to return. It's not dramatic, not Instagram worthy, but humility, steady and unglamorous, is why some hikers step from forest to parking lot at dusk, tired, blistered, but alive, while others vanish into headlines. So when the question surfaces, as it always does, would you ever trade the safety of civilization for the raw freedom of those days? I answer with a paradox. I carry the wild everywhere now. It lives behind my ribs like a second heartbeat. I don't need to gamble my life to feel its presence. I feel it in the way I notice cloud ceilings, in the reflex that counts paces between trailblazes, in the instinct that scans for water sources even on casual strolls through city parks. The ordeal wired me to see through both veneers, civilized and savage, and to understand that the distance between them can collapse in a single unexpected misstep. If my voice sounds urgent, it's because I'm speaking to the version of you who might one day stand where I stood. I'm handing you the torch I nearly extinguished. Hold it high, pack layers, pack redundancy, but above all, pack the unyielding decision that you will not bow to the easy lie of invincibility. When the map blurs and the batteries fail, let that decision blaze louder than fear. Tell the night, the wind, the nameless rustling beyond your circle of light. Not today. Then take one conscious breath, choose one deliberate direction, and step. Because the woods don't negotiate, but they do acknowledge resolve. And resolve, nurtured by respect, tempered by caution, fueled by wonder, is the closest thing to a compass that never falters. I learned that the hard way, 7 nights under an indifferent sky. You don't have to. But if you ever do, remember this voice. Remember that rivers sing even in darkness, that fire can bloom from shivering hands, and that the story isn't over until you decide to stop moving. Keep moving. And when the world welcomes you back with warmth, with coffee, with the soft, indistinct hum of electricity, carry the wild inside you like a secret promise to tread lighter, plan deeper, and live as if every sunrise is a reprieve earned by the bones of those who never made it home. The strange thing is, once you've lived through the wild like that, really lived through it, raw and alone, and broken down to your last thread of willpower, you stop needing to prove anything to anyone. Something fundamental shifts. You no longer chase adrenaline for its own sake. You don't argue with people online about gear weight or trail difficulty. You don't throw your miles around like medals because you've met the version of yourself who knows how thin the margin is, how fast it all goes from comfortable to critical. You've learned that there's nothing romantic about sleeping in wet clothes with a swollen leg, chewing pine needles because you don't trust your hunger anymore. And you felt that deep, soul-scraping silence that creeps in when even your thoughts stop making sense. That silence is what I remember most. Not the pain, not the cold, but that vast, starless quiet. It wasn't just the absence of sound, it was the presence of nothing. It hollowed me out. It made me face questions I didn't want to ask. What was I doing with my life? Who would I be if this was how it ended? And was I even okay with that? There, in that soundless void, I realized I'd been living half asleep, drifting, pretending that just being busy was the same as being alive. But out there, I couldn't hide. I had to wake up. And waking up hurt, because you can't go back to who you were before you knew what real survival feels like, before you knew how precious warmth is, or what it means to truly earn another sunrise. I've told this story to hundreds now, campers, hikers, search and rescue teams, even kids in schools. And every time there's this moment right near the end when the room goes still. People are holding their breath. They're waiting, not for a happy ending. They already know I made it out. They're waiting for the truth behind the survival, the why of it, why I didn't quit, why I didn't lie down under that log and wait for the forest to take me. And I always say the same thing, because I still had something to live for, even when I didn't know what it was, even when I couldn't see it clearly, even when it felt like a ghost. There was something, some tether, some flickering ember inside me that said no, that whispered, "You're not done yet." Maybe it was my mom's voice, or my brother's laugh, or the way the mountains looked from my bedroom window growing up. Maybe it was just stubbornness. But whatever it was enough. And here's what I've learned in the years since. You have to find that ember before you ever step foot on the trail. You can't wait until everything's gone sideways. You can't wait until you're bruised and starving and hallucinating faces in the trees. You have to know before the wild tests you what you're fighting for, who you are, what you believe in. Because the forest doesn't just take your strength, it takes your identity. And if you don't have something solid at your core, it'll hollow you out until there's nothing left but instinct and bones. But if you do, if you have something real inside you, it can carry you through anything. That's what survival is. Not a dramatic helicopter rescue, not a movie ending. It's 1,000 tiny decisions in the dark. It's choosing to stand when your legs scream. It's forcing water down when your stomach rebels. It's keeping your brain sharp when the fear wants to drown it. It's saying no to the part of you that wants to quit. And it's saying yes to the life waiting on the other side of the forest. When I got back, I thought I'd never hike again. For months, just walking near trees gave me chills. I'd wake up at night convinced I was still out there. I couldn't stand the sound of GPS alerts, but slowly, step by step, I returned. First, a walk near a river, then a trail I knew like the lines in my own palm. Eventually, a solo overnight in a place with full cell signal and 3 backup maps. And somewhere along that slow path back, I realized something. The wild hadn't broken me. It had reforged me. It burned away my arrogance. It cut through my distractions. It tore down the fragile scaffolding I'd mistaken for strength. And in its place, it built something better, not stronger, more honest. Now, when I walk into the woods, I don't do it to escape. I do it to remember what matters, to remember who I am when the noise falls away, and to remember the silence that once nearly swallowed me, but also carried me home. Because the truth is, the wild is not just a place, it's a mirror. It shows you what you're made of, and it doesn't care if you're ready. But I hope you are. I hope you learn from my story before you have to write your own with blood and blisters and frost on your breath. I hope you pack wisely. Tell someone where you're going. Bring the gear. Carry the map. Trust your gut. And never, never rely on a single device to bring you back. Because when the signal drops and the trail disappears and night presses in like a held breath, you'll only have one thing left. The choices you've made before this moment. Let them be good ones. Let them be the kind that keep your name off a missing persons report. Let them be the reason you walk back through that forest line at dawn, tired but intact. And when you do, remember this: you don't survive the wild by fighting it. You survive by listening, by adapting, by respecting its silence, and still choosing to sing into it. That's what I did. And that's what I'll do every time I step back into the trees, because I'm not afraid of the forest anymore. I'm just finally aware of the truth. It doesn't try to kill you. It just demands that you deserve to stay. It's been years now. People assume the fear fades with time, but the truth is, it doesn't. Not really. What changes is your relationship with it. You stop running from it. You stop pretending it wasn't real, and instead you sit with it. You give it a name. You learn from it. You let it walk beside you, because if you ignore it, that's when it creeps back in. Not as a warning, but as a weight. But when you face it head on, fear becomes something else entirely. It becomes awareness, presence, a kind of reverence for the fragility of the human body and the sheer uncompromising force of nature. I still hike alone sometimes, not recklessly, not like before. I tell people where I'm going now. I carry backups, maps, a compass, even a personal locator beacon. But I still go. Because the forest, despite everything it took from me, still calls me back. There's something about that green cathedral, the hush beneath the firs, the sighing of the wind through cedar boughs, the pulse of the earth beneath your boots, that no city, no screen, no streetlight can replace. It's not about escape. It's about remembering something we were never meant to forget, that we're animals, that we belong to the land, and that the wild isn't something to be conquered, it's something to be understood. Sometimes, when I'm deep on a trail and the trees are thick and the air is heavy with loam, I catch that same scent I smelled on the 6th night, that sharp, mineral tang of moss and desperation. And for a split second, I'm back there, knees scraped, lip cracked, heartbeat stuttering. But instead of fear, I feel something else now. I feel gratitude, because I made it. Because I got to keep going, and because there are people out there, people like you, who might one day find themselves in that same place. And if that happens, if your GPS fails and the trail disappears and night comes down like a lid over your eyes, I want you to remember what I'm about to say. You are not alone. You may feel alone, utterly, hopelessly isolated, but that's just the forest playing tricks. The truth is, you are walking in the footsteps of thousands who came before you. People who got lost, people who got hurt, people who panicked, people who survived. The woods don't care about your name, but they hold your story all the same. Because this isn't just a cautionary tale. It's a legacy. It's a thread in a tapestry that stretches back to the first human who ever wandered too far from the firelight. And when you're out there, really out there, you're not just facing the wild. You're standing at the edge of something ancient and honest and deeply terrifyingly true. You are not invincible, but you are capable. You are not fearless, but you are resilient. You are not perfect, but you are enough to adapt, enough to endure, enough to survive. I've seen people break in the woods, seen strong men crumble after a single wrong turn, seen seasoned hikers go silent when the night grows too loud. I've also seen first-time campers dig deep and keep moving when everything in their body begged them to stop. It's not about experience. It's not about strength. It's about will. It's about choosing again and again to move forward. Even when the path is gone, even when the hope runs thin, even when the forest doesn't answer your cries, because the forest won't answer, not with words, not with signs, not with a clear, easy way out. But it will teach you. It will teach you that light looks different when you haven't seen it in 3 days. It will teach you that water, cold, muddy, slow-moving water, can taste like heaven. It will teach you that even when everything is stripped away, your soul still fights. It still wants to make it. It still believes, somewhere deep beneath the doubt and the fatigue and the pain, that tomorrow is worth crawling toward. And if you listen, truly listen, the forest will give something back. It will give you clarity, not comfort, not kindness, but clarity. The clarity of knowing who you are when everything else has burned away. That's what I found in those 7 days. Not just survival, not just fear, but a mirror. And it didn't lie. It showed me who I was and who I could be if I chose to keep going. And I did. Not because I was strong, not because I was brave, but because I refused to let the woods take my story from me. And now I pass that story on to you. Not as a warning, but as a promise. That even when it feels like you are lost forever, even when your voice cracks from shouting into silence, even when you think no one will ever find you, you can still find yourself. Right there in the heart of the dark, right there in the hunger and the hurt and the howl of the wind, you are still there, and that is enough. It has to be. So go, explore the wild, walk the trails, climb the ridges, sleep beneath stars, but do it with respect, with humility, with preparation, with love, because the woods are not your enemy, they are your reflection. And if you treat them with care, they just might reveal something you didn't know you were looking for. They might even bring you home. Home, when you finally return to it after something like that, feels different. At first, it's overwhelming. The walls are too close. The air feels stale. The silence is artificial, muted by insulation, wrapped in the hum of appliances. You lie in bed and wait for the wind to shake the tent flap, for the crackle of leaves, for some distant night bird to call out. But it never comes. Instead, there's only the electric stillness of a world too removed from the rawness of nature. The first time I turned on a faucet, I stared at it for nearly a full minute. Just stared. Because in the woods, that much clean water coming at the twist of a wrist, it would have been a miracle. Now it was just plumbing. But it didn't feel ordinary anymore. None of it did. I didn't speak much that first week. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't explain the depth of what had changed inside me. It wasn't just that I'd been lost. It wasn't just that I'd nearly died. It was that I'd met myself, the part of me that lives beneath the skin of routine, the one who doesn't care about the news cycle or notifications or whether the car needs an oil change. That part of me was still awake, still alert, still watching. And he didn't trust the world I'd returned to. It took months to reconcile that, to let that wild version of me coexist with the man who sits in traffic, who smiles in grocery store aisles, who holds a coffee cup like it's a ritual. And I'm still learning how to balance it. how to honor both lives, because there's no real coming back from something like this. Not completely. There's only integration, growth, the careful, ongoing stitching together of two people, the one who got lost and the one who found his way back. But I've come to believe that's a good thing, that we need the wild, not just for escape, but for awakening, for reminding us who we are when the world stops handing us answers, when the path ends, when the map fades. You see, we've built our lives on the illusion of control, climate control, turn-by-turn directions, predictable outcomes. We forget that just beneath that polished surface is a world that doesn't follow our rules, a world that doesn't care how hard we worked, how smart we are, how much we planned. And every now and then, that world breaks through. And it asks us a question. Who are you without the map? That's the question I now live by, not just on hikes, but in every decision I make. When relationships falter, when plans fall apart, when I lose my footing, literal or not, I go back to that question. Who am I without the map, without the comfort, without the easy out? And I answer it the way I did on day 6, limping down a dry creek bed with nothing but the sun for guidance and a prayer in my chest. I am still moving. That's what matters. That's what saves you. Not the gear, not the strength, not even the hope, but the movement, the choosing. That's the one thing the wild gave me that I never want to lose, the understanding that survival is a verb. It's not a one-time act. It's not something that happens to you. It's something you do, consciously, repeatedly, fiercely. Every time you get up, when it'd be easier to lie down. Every time you step forward when your legs are shaking. Every time you say, I don't know where this leads, but I'm going anyway. That's survival. And eventually it becomes more than that. It becomes living. Because once you've come that close to the edge, once you've heard the forest whispering your name like it's deciding whether to keep you, you don't go back to living half alive. You don't chase noise for noise's sake. You seek something deeper, truer, and you find it in the details. The smell of wet earth after rain, the roughness of tree bark beneath your palm, the simple grounding rhythm of your breath as you climb a hill with no reception, no audience, no goal, just movement. You find it in the people you meet on the trail, strangers usually. But out there, strangers matter. There's no small talk when your pack's rubbing your shoulders raw and your knees are screaming. You nod, you exchange water tips, you say, stay safe, and you mean it. Because in the wild, we're all just trying to make it home. I think that's why this story still matters, not just to me, but to anyone who's ever felt that pull, the deep primal call of the woods. It's not always about the beauty. Sometimes it's about the truth, the stripping away, the unmasking. And I promise you, there's something waiting for you out there. Not something terrifying, though there's that too, but something real, something pure, something that doesn't care how much you earn, what you look like, or whether you've got your life figured out. The wild asks only one thing. Will you meet it honestly? No ego, no filters, no bravado, just you and your heartbeat and your willingness to keep going. If you can do that, if you can face it like that, then I believe the wild won't just take from you. It will give, not comfort, not ease, but clarity, meaning, and a kind of strength that doesn't break when the trail disappears. I found that strength the hard way. I hope you find it with open eyes and steady hands. But however you get there, when you do, listen, let the wind speak. Let the trees teach. Let the silence fill you up, not with fear, but with understanding. Because out there, beneath the canopy, past the last trail marker, beyond the signal and the schedules, is a version of you that's waiting to be found. And trust me when I say, that version is worth everything. Even the days lost, even the nights alone, even the silence that nearly swallowed you whole. Especially that. Because it's in that silence that your real story begins. And you don't need a GPS to find it, just the courage to take one more step. It wasn't grand. No beams of sunlight breaking through the canopy, no rescuers shouting my name through the trees. It was quiet, subtle. A clearing I hadn't seen before, A faint line of tire tracks in the dirt. A single rusted trail marker half swallowed by ivy, but enough. Enough to tell me I wasn't alone anymore. Enough to prove that the map wasn't needed anymore. I had made it, somehow. My legs gave out right there. Not from weakness, not anymore, but from release. I sat down in the dirt, leaned back against a rotting log, and I cried. Not out of sadness or even relief. It was something else, something deeper. I cried because I had survived, because the version of me that entered those woods didn't exist anymore. And the man who sat there, sobbing quietly as ants climbed over his boots and birds stirred overhead, was someone new, someone carved by hunger and doubt and fire, someone worthy of coming home. When they found me, a day later, I didn't say much. I just nodded. Let them wrap the blanket around me. Let the questions float over my head. I answered what I could, but most of what happened, it didn't fit into the language they needed. How do you explain that a forest can teach you more than a lifetime of schools? That silence can scream louder than panic? That pain isn't just suffering, it's signal? Some stories don't belong in incident reports. They belong in the marrow, in the dirt beneath your fingernails, in the aching places that remind you you're still alive. And that's where this story lives. People still ask me why I go back, why I still hike, still camp, still slip into that same wild that nearly erased me. They don't understand, and that's okay. It's not for everyone. But if you've ever stood at the edge of the tree line, heart racing, hands trembling with something that's not quite fear and not quite wonder, you know. Because the wild doesn't just test you, it remakes you. It doesn't ask for your comfort, it asks for your truth. And once you've given it, once you've offered your breath and your blood and your belief, it gives something back. Not safety, not shelter, but sovereignty. The knowledge that no matter what else happens in life, no matter who leaves, no matter what fails, no matter what map goes blank again, you have already made it through something that should have broken you, and you didn't break. You bent, you bled, but you did not break. That's the kind of knowledge no one can take from you. The kind that makes you walk differently, stand differently, live differently. So if you've ever been lost, truly lost, then hear me when I say, you are not weak. You are not cursed. You are not broken. You are becoming. And that becoming, it's messy. It's terrifying, but it is holy, because to lose your way is not failure. To stay lost, to refuse to learn, to refuse to grow, that's where failure lives. But if you walk out of that forest, eyes open and soul burning, that's something else. That's transformation. And that is the story worth telling. Not just mine, yours too. Because one day, maybe sooner than you think, you'll find yourself in your own woods, your own silence, your own 7-day darkness. And when that happens, I hope you remember this. You don't have to see the end. You don't have to have a map. You don't even have to know if you're going the right way. You just have to choose to keep moving, to keep breathing, to keep becoming. And when you do, when you take that step, no matter how small, the forest will see you. It will test you, but it will carry you, not out, not away, but through, to the version of yourself that was waiting there all along. In the dark, in the silence, in the wild. And when you meet them, you'll know you were never really lost. You were just on your way home. I've walked trails that don't exist on any map, not because they've faded or been overtaken by time, but because they were never meant to be walked in the first place. Paths carved by mistake, one wrong turn, one distraction, one breath too long in the wrong direction. And sometimes that's all it takes. 1 minute, one step, and a person is gone. I know because I was there. I was 28, stubborn, and restless. I had just quit a suffocating desk job in the city that had been draining the color out of my days. I was chasing something different. Peace, maybe. Solitude, maybe. But mostly, I was looking for the version of myself I thought I buried under years of fluorescent lights and concrete. So I packed up a lightweight tent, a fire starter, and a map I barely read. and I pointed my truck toward the Pacific Northwest, toward the ancient forest that had whispered my name since I was a child. And I went alone. The place I ended up in wasn't marked on the standard hiking maps. It was a spot recommended to me by a grizzled old man named Vince at a gas station off Route 22. He had leathery skin and eyes like rain clouds, and he said he'd grown up near those woods before people stopped asking about them. I should have known better than to trust someone who paused before finishing sentences, as if weighing whether the truth was worth telling. But I was young and reckless and aching for mystery, so I listened. Take the fork past Dry Creek and follow the dirt road until the asphalt disappears, he said. You'll come to an old gate. Don't worry if it's open or closed. Just walk through. Nobody uses it anymore. He looked at me then, and there was something unsettled behind his eyes. Stay on the trail. Don't step off. Not even for a minute. I laughed then. I remember that clearly. Not out of disrespect, but because it sounded like something out of a movie. I chalked it up to folklore, a tall tale told by locals who'd lived too long under the trees and forgotten the rest of the world existed. But I thanked him anyway, and 2 hours later, I was parked beneath the canopy of towering Douglas firs, the air thick with the smell of moss and damp wood. It was silent, save for the low rustle of the breeze winding through the branches like a slow breath. The trail started narrow but well-tread. Animal prints and old boot tracks told stories of those who'd passed through. I hiked in about 7 miles before I made camp beside a shallow stream that shimmered under the last light of day. The forest seemed almost alive then, pulsing with the sounds of insects and distant owls, but there was something else too, something quieter, a kind of stillness underneath it all, the kind that wraps around your spine like cold fingers, even when there's no wind. I told myself it was just the weight of solitude. I'd never camped alone this deep before. The trees were older than any I'd ever seen, thick and unmoving like stone giants, and at night their silhouettes cut through the sky like teeth. But I kept going. Each morning I woke to fog and the slow drip of dew from the canopy, and each night I fell asleep to the hush of the forest holding its breath. It was on the 4th day that everything changed. I'd broken camp early, aiming to reach a ridge about 5 miles ahead. I wanted to get there by midday so I could watch the sun spill over the valley like liquid gold. The trail twisted sharply through clusters of pine and rotting fallen trunks, and for the most part, I moved without much thought, until I heard something strange. A voice. It was faint, like a whisper carried by the wind, just behind me and just far enough to make me doubt I'd heard it at all. I stopped, turned, nothing, just the woods, quiet and different. But the voice came again. This time clearer. It wasn't calling my name or anything specific. It was a low murmur, like someone talking to themselves. I should have kept walking. I should have ignored it. But I stepped off the trail. It was only for a moment, 30, maybe 40 feet into the trees. I remember thinking I'd find someone, maybe another hiker who'd gotten turned around. But the deeper I went, the quieter everything became. Even the birds had stopped singing. I called out, but my voice sounded swallowed by the trees like the forest didn't want it to travel. And then I heard the voice again, closer this time. It was coming from ahead and to the left, just beyond a fallen log tangled in brambles. I stepped over it, pushing through the undergrowth. The sound was gone, silence. And then I realized I didn't know which way I'd come. My heart slammed against my chest as I spun in place, trying to pick a direction. Trees. Just trees. Every trunk looked the same. There were no markers, no footprints, nothing. I'd only been off the trail for a minute, maybe 2 at most, but the trail was gone completely. I tried retracing my steps, but the terrain shifted under my feet in ways I didn't recognize. The trees seemed closer now, denser, and that voice, it never came back. Just silence. That's when panic started to bleed into my mind. You can know every survival tip in the world, but none of it prepares you for the moment the forest decides you don't belong. I walked for what felt like hours, hoping to find something, anything, a clearing, a landmark, a sound. But the deeper I went, the more twisted the forest became. I passed the same dead tree 3 times, though I couldn't explain how. At one point, I stumbled into a patch of cold air, so sharp it took my breath away. And in that stillness, I swear I heard footsteps behind me, slow, careful, deliberate. I turned, but nothing was there. I didn't sleep that night. I sat against a rock with my knife in hand and my ears straining against the silence. Every rustle, every twig snap, every distant crunch made my heart seize. I wasn't alone. I didn't feel watched. I felt surrounded. By morning, I'd lost all sense of direction. The compass I carried spun uselessly, twitching like it couldn't decide where north was. My GPS? Dead, no signal. I climbed a small ridge, hoping to get a view, but all I saw were more trees, endless and unmoving, like they'd closed in around me overnight. That's when I heard the voice again. Not behind me this time, above me. Like it was coming from the canopy. It whispered something I couldn't understand, but I felt it in my chest like thunder. I ran. And I ran blindly, tripping over roots, scraping my arms on bark and stone, tearing through branches that felt like they were reaching for me. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to move. I had to get out. That's when I found the boot. A single, weather-worn hiking boot half buried in the mud, moss growing over the top, and not far from it, a rusted camping stove split open like it had been thrown. I looked around, half expecting someone to be there, but there was nothing. No pack, no body, just silence. And that's when I knew I wasn't the first. I knelt by the boot, fingers trembling as I brushed away the moss. The leather peeled at my touch like ancient bark. A name was faintly etched into the inside rim, R. Miller, but the letters were barely legible, worn thin by weather and time. I looked around again, heart hammering, as if the forest might offer an explanation. It didn't. It just stood there, quiet and watchful, like it had swallowed him whole, and waited for the next. The air grew colder, unnaturally so. A weight settled on my chest that wasn't panic, but something else, something older. That feeling when you walk into a room where something awful happened years ago, and the silence still remembers. The trees around me whispered, but not with the wind. They creaked like they were murmuring to each other, trading secrets in a language of groaning limbs and shivering leaves. I didn't know who R. Miller was, but I knew he hadn't walked out of these woods. And somewhere in the depths of my gut, I realized something dark. The forest hadn't let him go. By the time I moved again, the sky had shifted into a bruised purple. Dusk came faster here, unnaturally fast, like light didn't belong. I pressed forward, dragging my legs through thick brush, trying to head downhill, any direction that might lead to a stream or road. But the landscape was warping. I passed trees I could have sworn I'd seen before, rock formations that mirrored each other in eerie, unnatural ways. And every time I stopped to listen, I swore I heard footsteps not far behind me, always just out of sight. I called out again, not for help, but out of desperation. My voice sounded small, useless, the kind of voice you hear once and forget. Still, I yelled, and someone answered, a single word echoing from somewhere deeper in the wood, help. It wasn't loud, it wasn't urgent. It was like someone repeating the word out of habit. I froze, trying to pinpoint the direction, but it bounced around me like sound didn't obey the same laws here. I shouted again, asking where they were. Silence. Then again, help. Quieter this time, and more distorted, like it had passed through too many mouths before reaching me. My instincts screamed at me to ignore it, but I walked anyway, toward it, because when you're alone that long, even a lie sounds like salvation. The forest opened slightly, a small clearing ringed with stones. In the center, a torn blue tarp, faded from years of sun and rain. Beside it, bones, not an animal. I didn't need to be a coroner to recognize the curve of a human ribcage, half buried in dirt, and near the skull, a tarnished wristwatch, still ticking. My breath caught. I stumbled backward, eyes darting across the clearing, looking for signs of recent life. but there were none. Just the echo of that voice again, right behind me this time, brushing the edge of my neck like warm breath. Help. I spun. Nothing. But when I turned back, the tarp was gone. The bones were gone. Just leaves. Just dirt. Just silence. I ran again. No direction. No plan. My legs burned, lungs clawing at the cold air. I ran until I collapsed against the base of a tree, hands digging into the moss-covered roots. My throat was raw from screaming. And then I laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because it was the only thing left. The absurdity of it. One step off the trail, one voice, and now I was being unraveled by something I couldn't explain, something older than fear. The forest wasn't just a place, it was a presence, and it didn't lose people, it kept them. Night fell like a curtain, and the stars above me blinked slowly as if from behind glass. I built a fire, but the warmth didn't comfort me. Shadows moved just beyond its light, quiet and slow, circling like wolves. But I never saw them. I only heard the breathing. Low, wet, wrong. I don't remember falling asleep. I don't remember dreaming. But I woke to find my fire dead and a line of footprints in the ash circling where I lay. Bare feet, too large, too many toes. And in the dirt beside me, a word had been drawn with a finger. Stay. I didn't scream. Not then. I didn't move. I just stared at that word until the sun clawed its way over the horizon, and I told myself it was a trick, a dream, a hallucination from exhaustion. But deep down, I knew. I wasn't just lost. I was being kept. That day, I didn't try to find the trail. I only tried to survive. I drank from the stream. I ate dried nuts sparingly, and I kept my back to a cliff wall so nothing could get behind me. The trees watched. The forest waited, and I felt it growing inside me. The fear, yes, but also the knowing. You don't leave this place unless it wants you to. You don't step off the trail unless you're ready to pay for it. And I did pay, in ways I still can't speak aloud. It took 5 days before I stumbled, literally staggered into the arms of a search party. They'd been looking for me for 3 days. They said I'd gone silent. My GPS ping stopped just hours after my first night. My camp was found intact, unburned, untouched. But I was 13 miles from where I should have been. I don't remember those miles. I don't remember the screams they say they heard over the radio, screams in my voice. But I do remember this. As they walked me out of the woods, half conscious and shaking, I looked back once, just once. And in the shadows between two trees, I saw a figure, tall, motionless, wearing a backpack, one boot missing. They said it was shock, trauma hallucination. My mind cracked open by isolation and fear, stitching together symbols to make sense of the madness. But I know what I saw. I know what stood there, watching, not moving, not blinking, as if it had taken the shape of someone long gone, or maybe it had always worn that shape. Maybe it became the people it consumed, one by one, piece by piece, until their voices weren't their own anymore. R. Miller wasn't a ghost. He wasn't a warning. He was part of that place now. Like the moss or the fog or the stones etched with age-old names no one remembers. And when I saw that figure between the trees, the only thing I felt was a cold certainty. That was where he had always been. That was where I had almost joined him. The men who found me didn't ask too many questions. Maybe they'd heard stories before. Maybe they didn't want to know. Or maybe they were just used to finding less. One of them, a younger guy with calloused hands and a kind face, handed me a blanket and said, "People go missing out here more than you'd believe. Most of them don't come back." He didn't say it like a warning. He said it like he was tired of seeing the forest take things it wasn't supposed to. I spent 3 days in a hospital after they brought me out. Dehydration, hypothermia, half my left leg covered in angry red welts from insect bites that looked almost deliberate. A few of the doctors asked if I'd gotten tangled in thorn brush. I didn't answer, because the truth is, I didn't remember being bitten. I just woke up with those marks, as if something had touched me while I slept. Probing, mapping. On my final night in the hospital, long after visiting hours had ended, I woke to the sound of someone standing in my room, just breathing, slow, steady. I was too groggy to move, too weak to speak. but I remember the silhouette. Not a nurse, not a doctor. Tall, still, and barefoot. When the nurse flicked on the lights, there was no one there, but the air was cold and the floor was wet. I left the Pacific Northwest and never returned. I moved south, somewhere flatter, warmer, farther from the ancient grip of towering pines, somewhere where the forest doesn't feel like it's thinking. But I still wake at night to the sound of someone calling out. Help, always the same word, always the same voice. Not quite mine, not quite Miller's, something in between. And sometimes in the morning, I find dirt beneath my fingernails. Forest dirt, damp and rich, like I'd been digging or trying to climb out. I never told my family the full story. They know I went hiking and got lost. They know I was lucky to be found. But they don't know what I saw, what followed me, what called me. I've tried writing it down like this dozens of times, but it always comes out wrong. Either too clean or too chaotic, too fictional, too unbelievable. But this time, I want to tell it exactly as it was, because it's still out there. That forest, that voice, that moment. One step off the trail. That's all it took. 1 minute. And I'm telling you this now not because I want to scare you, but because I want you to remember something I forgot. Something that might save you if you ever find yourself out there alone, listening to the trees breathe around you. The forest remembers the footsteps of everyone who's ever walked it. It remembers their warmth, their fear, their names, and sometimes it wants them back. So if you ever hear a voice calling from just beyond the trees, don't follow it. Don't listen, no matter how real it sounds, because once you leave the path, once you step off the trail, you might never come back the same. If you come back at all. Sometimes I wonder if I did come back at all. If the person who stepped out of those woods is really me, or just a version molded by something ancient and unknowable. I laugh at that thought in the daylight when the sun is warm on my face and the world feels stable, ordinary. But when night falls, when shadows lean long against the walls and the wind begins to whisper again through cracks and corners, I don't laugh. I listen. Because the forest left something inside me. Not just memory, not just fear. Something deeper, something alive. There are days I can't look at trees the same, even the harmless ones, sycamores in the suburbs, neat rows of pines in city parks. I can't shake the feeling they're pretending, disguising themselves, hiding their truth behind leaves and bark and stillness. I'll walk my dog through the neighborhood and find myself staring too long at the edge of a wooded lot, expecting something to move, not an animal, but a shape, a wrongness, like something watching, waiting. I've tried to talk to others who've gone missing before. I've searched message boards, survivor forums, local legends, but most don't respond. And the few who do, they never say much. One guy messaged me back after I posted about the man I saw, R. Miller. He only said, "You saw him too?" Then nothing. Account deleted. Gone. What I've come to believe is this. Those who are taken by the forest or touched by it or even glimpsed by it carry a piece of it forever. You don't get to leave untouched. You don't just walk out and go back to a normal life. Something changes. Something opens. And once it's open, it stays open. You see things, you feel things, and you understand things you shouldn't. The forest doesn't hate us. It doesn't hunt us. It hungers for us. Because somewhere along the line, long before trails were cut and maps were drawn and tents were sold in shiny little boxes, we belonged to it. We were part of it. But we walked away. We paved over its roots and fenced off its shadows. And now every so often, it takes something back. A hiker, a camper, a child chasing a bird too far from their parents. And sometimes it doesn't even take your body. It just takes you. I've spoken with people who've had close calls, stories half laughed over beers at mountain lodges, or whispered around the fire long after the kids have gone to bed. A guy who saw a woman standing naked and smiling in the snow. A girl who heard her mother's voice calling from the trees, even though her mother had died years ago. A man who followed a trail for 6 hours only to realize he was walking in a circle, and in the center of that circle, Something had been watching the whole time. They all say the same thing in different ways. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't right. And I believed them. I believed them because I saw what happens when you stop listening to your gut and start listening to it. It doesn't come at you with claws or fangs. It doesn't roar or scream. It asks, it invites, it waits, and the moment you accept just one step, you've already lost. They never found R. Miller's body. Not really, just bits, clues, a sock here, a rusted knife there. Enough to build a theory, to put something on a report, but no bones, no grave, no closure. The woods don't bury you. They hold you. Sometimes I think about writing to his family, telling them what I saw, that I saw their son or brother or husband standing in the woods, backpack slung over one shoulder, watching me with eyes that didn't blink. But I don't, because how could I ever make them understand? How do you tell someone their loved one didn't die, he just stopped being human? I wonder, too, if someone else will find that trail one day. If they'll step off for just a second, chasing a bird, or a sound, or a lie whispered through the trees. And I wonder if they'll find what I did, or worse. I carry a photo in my wallet now. It's not of me. It's of the trailhead, just the gate slightly ajar, with forest swallowing everything behind it. I took it the morning I set off. At the time, I thought it looked peaceful. Now I can't even look at it without feeling my pulse quicken. That gate wasn't an entry point. It was a mouth. And I walked straight into it. I've spent years rebuilding my life. Therapy, medication, routine. I work a job that keeps me inside. I keep lights on longer than I should, and I tell myself I'm safe. But some nights when the wind is just right, I hear the trees again, calling, rustling with that deep, knowing hush. And sometimes I hear my own voice out there in the dark, help. And I don't know anymore if it's a memory or if a part of me is still there, still lost, still waiting, still stepping off the trail. But the thing is, I came back, and that means something. That means not everything in the forest is stronger than us. That means even in the deepest dark, even when the trail disappears and your name is nothing but an echo swallowed by trees older than language, you can fight your way out. You can scream back. You can claw at the dirt and say, not me, not today. Because fear doesn't own you, it tests you. And that forest, whatever it is, however it moves, however it waits, isn't just a predator. It's a mirror. It shows you the version of yourself that doesn't believe you're worth saving, and then it dares you to prove it wrong. So yeah, I stepped off the trail. I was drawn to something I'll never be able to explain. I heard a voice that didn't belong to anything living. I felt the breath of something that never blinks. And for a moment, I gave in. I let it pull me under. But I also crawled out. I bled for it. I burned for it. I screamed until the silence broke. And that is what I want you to remember. Because if you're listening to this now, maybe you're planning a trip. Maybe you're craving adventure. Maybe you're standing at the edge of some decision in your life, some metaphorical forest that calls you in. And maybe part of you is already wondering, what's the worst that could happen? Let me tell you, the worst is not death. The worst is forgetting who you are. The worst is letting fear rewrite your name until there's nothing left of you but footprints leading in and silence echoing back. But you don't have to let that happen. Every choice is a trail. Every breath, a direction. And the map, your map, is written by your steps, not your fear. So when the voices call to you, whispering from the shadows of your own doubts, when the path splits and one direction feels safe and the other feels right in that terrifying electric way, when you're cold and tired and unsure and it would be so easy to stop walking, keep going. Not because it's easy, but because the forest is watching. And it's not just testing your courage, it's testing your memory. Do you remember who you are? Do you remember what you came for? Because that's what pulled me out in the end. Not a map, not a compass, not even luck. It was the truth of myself, buried beneath fear, beneath exhaustion, beneath the voice whispering, stay. I found it. I remembered it. And that's how I walked out. You are not just a wanderer. You are not just a name on a report or a photo on a wall. You are not a story the woods get to finish. You are the fire. You are the scream that doesn't stop. You are the step back onto the trail. So if you ever find yourself out there, lost, afraid, surrounded by silence that feels too alive, remember me. Remember this story, not because it's mine, but because it could be yours. And when the trees close in, when the air gets thin, when something old and patient whispers your name like it owns you, step forward anyway. And don't stop walking, ever, because some trails aren't meant to be followed. They're meant to be escaped. And survival, real survival, isn't about finding your way back. It's about never letting the dark decide who you become. He stepped off the trail for 1 minute and was never seen again. But you're still here. You're still breathing, and you're not done yet.